Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. Two significant diplomatic events have simultaneously taken place in the Middle East recently, both following the recent airstrike in Qatar, but each taking on a different direction. In Doha, regional representatives, mostly in the American camp, but also including the Iranian foreign minister, met in an Arab-Muslim conference to criticize the Israeli strike on the Qatari-based Hamas cockpit. And in Jerusalem, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio showed his support for Israel's Gaza war policy, which the Qatar strike was supposedly a part of. So how is this region now strategically aligned with so many contradicting vectors? Joining us to dissect and potentially also provide some answers to the latest, including from the United States, Professor Russell Berman, who formerly served as a senior advisor at the U.S. Policy Planning Staff at the U.S. State Department, also currently the director of the Middle East and Islamic World Working Group at Hoover Institution at Stanford University. It's great to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Jonathan.
It's a pleasure indeed. Also joining us from elsewhere here in Israel is Ambassador Danya Yalon, who formerly served as Israel's ambassador to the United States, Israel's deputy foreign minister, and currently, among others, he also co-hosts our very own TV7 Middle East review. It's great to see you, Ambassador.
Thank you. Always good to be with you, Jonathan.
It's always a pleasure indeed. And last but not least, Mr. Amir Oren, our TV7 editor-at-large. And Mr. Oren, the strategic composition of the Middle East, even though very coherent at times, as of late, not very much so. Set the stage for us.
So it's a very delicate balancing act when you look at it from Washington, because obviously two friends and partners of the U.S., Israel and Qatar, are at loggerheads. Israel used the good offices of Qatar first to pay Hamas when the Palestinian Authority stopped moving the financing needed to pay salaries for officials there. Of course, Hamas also used 40% of that for its military arm. But later, after October 7, Qatar has been one of the two Arab mediators alongside Egypt. But because Qatar has been hosting the Hamas leadership, at least those leaders who are outside of Gaza, Israel has seen fit to strike these leaders even during the negotiations, even though Qatar is hosting the Al Udeid air base, the biggest airbase for CENTCOM. Qatar is on very good terms with President Trump himself, giving him his next Air Force One, and so on and so forth. So Rubio, who went to Israel and from Israel to Doha, had to balance the conflicting needs of the administration to keep supporting Israel, including in the Gaza operation, which started between Monday and Tuesday, and still try to get the negotiations between Israel and Hamas to a culmination, hopefully, using, again, the mediators that Qatar has provided.
Indeed. Well, just one correction. It's not the next Air Force One. It's the interim aircraft for the president until the next Air Force One takes effect or is brought into the Air Force. It will be brought into the U.S. Department of Defense, but from what I understood from people in Washington, by the time it's already done in the process of building, it will be already after President Trump leaves.
No, after his second term, maybe during his fourth or sixth term.
Well, you know, the U.S. Law is quite clear about that. But all joking aside, Professor Berman, strategically speaking, we are experiencing quite the challenging reality, and that is even mildly put, at a time when there are so many different developments, different policies that are related on the one hand to the United States, but also contradictory to both what the United States intends, and then also in relation to its allies and partners, which do not necessarily see eye to eye.
Uh, as we've already heard, it's a complicated situation. It's a balancing act for the United States. But what seems to be clear from statements in Washington and from Secretary Rubio's statements during his trip is that the United States is firmly behind the Gaza campaign. I don't see any daylight there at all. For us on the outside, and I assume we're all on the outside looking in, it's we have to understand, we have to ask how much of the statements in Doha are really for public consumption. Of course, the Saudis and the others have to demonstrate Arab solidarity. They're not going to break with Arab brethren over this. But I can't believe that there's not some delight inside Riyadh to seeing Doha get hit. Um, uh, I also ask what the significance was of the Israeli strike in Doha. Um, does this indicate that the Netanyahu government believes that the negotiation route is actually fruitless and that the so-called negotiators in Doha were just uh, playing for time? Or was this an effort to give them one final nudge to say it's time to cut a deal? This seems to be a widespread international position that by now Hamas has lost and it should give up.
Well, the Doha conference of leaders of the Organization for Islamic Cooperation culminated with merely a statement condemning Israel and the rhetoric accompanied to it, much disinformation and misinformation inseminated into the public sphere. But the fact that they have failed to secure some type of joint action, which was what Doha was vying for, does speak louder than words. And in that context, I'd like to ask you, Ambassador Ayalon, when we're hearing also Professor Berman and Mr. Owen's analysis is also relevant here. Uh, when we hear them say, look, you know what, there is no daylight right now between the United States and Israel when it comes to the situation in the Gaza Strip, the ongoing campaign right now, of course, in its new phase of Gideon's Chariots #2. Nonetheless, the Americans do have other considerations to take into account when we're talking about the broader region, and not only the broader region on the level of strategic power competition. How does Israel maneuver within this complexity, and what is the reaction from America's side?
Well, Jonathan, first of all, I think it's fundamentally necessary for Israel to keep the United States informed and be on the same page. I don't think it would be a far-fetched, inconceivable idea that the US did know prior or was advised about the attack in Doha. We have to remember, and we have to, I would say, to distinguish here between the fundamental interests and all the rhetoric and all, I would say, the noise around or the chatter around. The fundamentals have not changed, whether it's in Gaza or in the Gulf. And the United States, together with Israel, see actually the demise of Hamas as a high priority in order to calm down the region, in order to do away with the most nefarious and ruthless terror organization. And also by that, I mean, by eliminating Hamas, paving the way to a new regional order, whether normalization with Saudi Arabia and all the way maybe to a full peace with the Gulf countries, maybe except Qatar. And this is something which the United States sees not only on a moral or ethical value, but also as a way to stop Russia and to stop China from coming into the region. So within this context, I think the United States is fully backing the Israel in Gaza. And also, when it came to the attack in Doha, we did not hear any condemnation. It was quite a convoluted message from the White House, but I think it was more just to save the face of the Qataris, anything else. And the most important thing, Jonathan, is that, as you mentioned, the Doha conference ended with no concrete steps, no actionable items, of course, a lot of harsh rhetorics, but that shows again that the fundamental interests supersede the Qataris' fury.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Owen, a day prior to the strike, we had Bradford Cooper, the Admiral Bradford Cooper, that is, commander of CENTCOM, visiting Israel, having robust discussions on various levels, strategic included, which does raise many questions as to whether or not the Americans did not know about this ahead of time. I highly doubt they did not know, but that's already my own opinion since I do not have concrete insight into the matter. But
They probably were advised that there is such an operational contingency plan, that the final approval has not been given, and it wasn't. It only took place after the terror act in Jerusalem, in which 6 Israeli civilians were killed, along with 4 Israeli soldiers who were killed the same day in Gaza, that Netanyahu brought this plan for approval. So there is a difference between telling Admiral Cooper, listen, one of these days we may act against the Hamas leadership in Qatar, and telling him, day after tomorrow at 4 p.m., we will do so and so. So you can both advise him as to the general probability or possibility, but not tell him that it is on.
particularly when timing is a big factor here for a gathering of Hamas leaders at a single spot, which is, of course, obscure at most until the last minute when they make such
And apparently the intelligence wasn't very accurate.
Well, time will tell because I do hear conflicting reports on this as well. But nonetheless, we will draw into the strategic. And Professor Berman, when we're talking strategically, considering the fact that we are at an age of strategic power competition, the Chinese and the Russians are closely monitoring every step in the region, even during Secretary Rubio's visit. There was a lot of highlighting by Chinese elements and algorithms about how robust of a relationship there is between Washington and Jerusalem, while its allies and partners are very frustrated about the situation. At least this is what the latest information is emanating out of Beijing. What are we to take out of that, and to what degree does the United States consider or take into consideration the strategic level vis-a-vis China when we're talking about the Middle East?
Well, it's already been stated that the United States has these larger geostrategic concerns. We are in this age of great power competition, particularly with China, and the United States wants to achieve an integrated Middle East that is linked in friendly relations with the United States. This is clear. This means excluding China, and to a large extent, China has been excluded. Its role in the region is still largely marginal, except in the propaganda space. The story with Russia is different. It's been excluded from or significantly reduced in Syria. And I think there's a question as to what Russia's future role will be in the region. Long term, I believe that the vision in the Trump foreign policy camp is, of course, to to degrade the enemy, but potentially to split Russia and China, and that's a complicated game. It could mean trying to push back on Russia in Ukraine while at the same time looking ahead to a positive relationship with Russia in the future because China is the real adversary.
Indeed. With that being said, in a interview earlier this week by the interim president in Syria, Ahmed al-Shara, he came out and stated that he reached a deal with Moscow in order to ultimately bring about the downfall of the Assad regime before entering Damascus, something that he made merely a couple of weeks after his foreign minister traveled to Russia to meet with both his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, as well as with President Vladimir Putin. There is a very large debt that Syria has with regard to all kind of commodities, including grain and wheat that was delivered to Syria under the Assad regime that carries on into this new regime at a time when, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, we're talking about a deficit of roughly 2.15 million tons of grain that Damascus must import during the remainder of 25 and 2026 alone in order to feed its own population that is very much reliant on the free distribution of bread and may once again embroil itself in a very devastating civil war were this to be taken away from the Syrian population. How are we to take this complex situation into consideration when we're talking about the U.S. considering strategic power competition also vis-a-vis Russia at a time when war rages against Ukraine?
Yeah. As I tried to indicate, the United States has this two-tiered approach to Russia. It wants to push back on Russia in Ukraine. It does not want to see Russia as a significant military force in the Mediterranean. At the same time, I believe that there is a vision of a positive relationship with Russia, perhaps in a post-Putin Russia, in order to split it off from China. I think there's also a question for Israel as to whether the Russian presence in Syria isn't ultimately a positive insofar as Jerusalem has a history of being able to work with Russia at the very least for deconfliction and to maintain Syria as a as a non-threatening adjacent state.
So, pursuing the Kissingerian approach is indeed something that the United States has been pursuing since day one in the hopes of decoupling Russia from reliance on China in many of the spheres. But Ambassador Ayalon, I'd like to hear your take on the complexity from a strategic level from Israel's perspective. How should Israel operate strategically at a time when it is embroiled in a multi-front war and it faces numerous challenges? It does have robust support right now from the United States of America, and yet it needs to also consider long-term trajectories that may challenge it in the future.
Yes, well, I would say that first and foremost, the short term is, I would say, the crucial thing. I believe it was Keynes who said that in the long run, everyone is dead. In the short term, that means at least in the next 3.5 years of the Trump administration, I think Israel can really rely on the strong backing of the United States, which really is, I would say, which supersedes the negativities coming from the rest of the world. It's that simple in a way. However, for the long run, I believe Israel will have enough time to change the situation. We must remember that public memory, whether it's within domestic issues or international issues, inside countries, outside countries, is quite short. So nothing is, I would say, irreparable. It's everything could be rescinded. And once the war in Gaza is over, and indeed, if we will have some rapprochement or even diplomatic relations with Gulf countries, I would think that in a matter of a very short time, the entire international community, which is right now against Israel, could pivot for its support. Another factor, of course, is the north. Our northern, let's say, borders, which have always been the most dangerous, the ones, the most unexpectable, today is quite expectable. In Lebanon, we are reaching a new modicum of national arrangement, domestic arrangement in Lebanon, and also between Lebanon and Israel, and within Syria also. I think that right now we see a real impetus, a real emphasis of the Trump administration to reach at least some kind of non-belligerence agreement with Chara, with Syria, and that also would, in due time, contribute to Israel's better standing. It's not going to be overnight, but also it's not too long or too complicated to change the world's, let's say, perspective of the region and of Israel itself.
Indeed, there are indeed reports circulating about some type of arrangement that is in the making between Jerusalem and Damascus under immense American pressure, as it's put in a Reuters article. I think we also need to take those type of reports with utmost caution, considering the level of disinformation related to those type of reports these days, and particularly with keen interests on the other side, namely that of Damascus, Qatar, and Turkey, to advance a certain reality that does not necessarily conform with the national security interests of Israel. But this is for another discussion. We are drawing near to the end of the program, and I'd like each of you to have a brief analysis of where things are heading. Please keep it up to a minute, and we'll start with you, Mr. Owen.
You know, each time there is some tension between a global power like the United States, which is also a major arms supplier, and a regional actor, you hear from the government of the regional actor that they may reconsider the arms supply relationship. They may turn to a competitor, in the American case, Russia, China, or even Europe. It's not so easy. We have seen what has happened in Iran after the revolution, when the relationship was broken between them, and the F-4 Phantoms and the like were grounded. Now, after the Doha strike, some people in Qatar said, well, we will turn to Russia and China. You cannot move from the American defense industry to a Russian or Chinese one overnight. It's good for propaganda. In reality, there is only the United States as a major arms supplier.
Indeed. Professor Berman, I'd like to hear your analysis. Where are we heading to from a strategic perspective throughout the Middle East?
I think we're heading toward a resolution of the Gaza war. It's going to be violent, but whatever is left of Hamas leadership is going to have to, at some point, just decide that they're surrendering, and then there'll be a process of establishing some probably joint Arab force for governance in Gaza. This has been clear for the past several months at least, and it's a tragedy that the Hamas leadership hasn't figured this out yet, but they'd rather see their people killed than give up. At a certain point, it will become inescapable.
Indeed. Ambassador Ayalon, your take?
Well, I would say that one thing certain is that Israel has reestablished deterrence in a very big way and continues to do that. I think this will also help to stabilize the region for the long run. And indeed, if we look geopolitically here at the landscape, the political landscape, it seems like we are, I would say, carefully at the latter days of the Khamenei's regime, maybe even Erdogan, and I would dare say also of Netanyahu, talking about 1-2 year span. So we may see a region that in 2-3 years will have totally new leadership, which can actually bank on the new strategic order and hopefully stability that can take the region up into the future in a very prosperous and secure way.
It's a very interesting remark, considering that those leaders have been here in the Middle East dictating discourse for many, many decades now. Many
Mahmoud
years now.
Abbas too.
Mahmoud Abbas too. He is not very healthy, which is an understatement. In his latter 80s
Yes.
these days. There's going to be a lot of new blood, so to speak. And that is, of course, in a matter of years, but nonetheless, that is quite dramatic when we're talking about Middle Eastern affairs, global affairs, since the Middle East does have a lot of impact, and let alone other type of rulers here in the region who are also under direct threat, which may also alter discourse. So everything is fluid. Every projection is merely a projection and needs to be taken into account for the present and immediate future. Long term, there are many questions still to be asked, and we will attempt to do so in our future panels. But with that, I'd like to thank Professor Berman and Ambassador Ayalon, Mr. Amir Oren, of course, for all of your insights. And I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem. Shalom.